So, India just gave the green light to one of its most ambitious and, you could say, most controversial mega projects ever. We're talking about the Great Nicobar Project. It's a plan so huge it could completely reshape the country's strategic and economic future. So, what's all the buzz about?
Okay, let's really dig into this because, this isn't just about building some new port. We're talking about a massive, all-encompassing plan to turn one of India's most remote, pristine islands into an absolute powerhouse of logistics, military strength, and urban life. The ripple effects for the entire region are going to be huge.
All right, to really wrap our heads around this whole thing, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, what's the grand vision? Then, why is this being called a geopolitical game changer? After that, we'll look at the economic boom it's supposed to create, followed by the very serious environmental and human cost. And finally, we'll check out the road ahead now that it's gotten the go-ahead.
So, let's start with the absolute basics. Where are we talking about? Great Nicobar is India's southernmost island, way out there in the Andaman and Nicobar chain. And its sheer remoteness is exactly what makes the scale of what's being planned so, well, mind-boggling.
We're talking about a massive investment here, over $10 billion, or more than 90,000 crore rupees. This whole thing is being driven by India's policy think tank, Niti Aayog, and it's one of the biggest greenfield projects the country has ever tried. That just means they're building it from scratch on totally undeveloped land. I mean, that's a huge task anywhere, let alone on a remote island. The whole project is kind of designed to be its own self-sufficient world, really, built on 4 main pillars. You've got a massive new international container port, an airport that can be used by both civilians and the military, a brand new city planned to house up to 300,000 people someday, and a hybrid power plant to make sure it all keeps running.
But the real power of this project doesn't just come from what they're building, but where they're building it. Location, as they say, is everything.
Great Nicobar is sitting just 40 nautical miles away from the Strait of Malacca. And you have to understand, this narrow stretch of water, it's one of the most vital shipping lanes on the entire planet. A huge chunk of global trade, most of East Asia's oil, and all that massive container traffic between Europe and Asia, it all has to squeeze through here.
So, what does this all mean strategically? Well, here's the bottom line. Setting up shop here gives India an unprecedented eye on this critical choke point. It seriously beefs up India's only tri-service military command, allows for the rapid deployment of ships and troops, and, let's be frank, it serves as a powerful counterweight to China's growing influence in the region. In short, India is planting a flag on its own sovereign territory to project its power in a big, big way.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the money. How is this project supposed to spark an economic revolution and turn India into a real logistics powerhouse?
Now, this right here, this chart exposes a major vulnerability in India's current system. Get this, a staggering 75% of India's transshipment cargo, that's cargo that gets moved from a big ship to smaller ones, is actually handled by foreign ports. Places like Colombo and Sri Lanka, Singapore, and ports in Malaysia.
This slide just lays out the before and after picture perfectly. The current system means India is losing money in foreign currency, shipping takes longer, and it's a strategic liability. The Great Nicobar port is meant to flip that script entirely. By handling this traffic at home, the idea is to cut costs, speed things up, and ultimately make Indian goods way more competitive on the world stage. And the key to all this economic potential comes down to these things called mother vessels. Think of them as the super tankers of the container ship world, the absolute biggest of the big. They need really deep ports to dock, something India has been short on. This new port is being built specifically to handle these giants, aiming to shift India from being just a secondary feeder market to a primary, top-tier global shipping destination.
Okay, but this grand vision, it comes with a huge, huge cost. We have to look at the other side of the coin now, the serious environmental and social issues that make this whole thing so incredibly controversial. You see, Great Nicobar isn't just some empty island. It's a designated global biodiversity hotspot, a world treasure. The project puts vital mangrove forests and coral reefs at risk. It's a critical nesting ground for the endangered leatherback sea turtle. And to build all this, the plan calls for clearing over 130 square kilometers of pristine, ancient tropical rainforest. And the ecological cost, well, it's matched by a potential human tragedy. The island is home to indigenous communities, including the Nicobarese people and most critically, the Shompen tribe. The Shampan are officially designated as a particularly vulnerable tribal group who live in almost total isolation. The fear is that this project will lead to their displacement, the destruction of their ancient culture, and exposure to diseases from the outside world that they have absolutely no immunity to.
So, that brings us right up to today. After years of debate and legal fights, the project suddenly has a clear path forward. But believe me, this story is far from over. The government's initial environmental approval, which came back in 2022, was challenged almost immediately. But, and this is the crucial recent development, the National Green Tribunal has now upheld that clearance. This is a massive turning point. It basically removes a major roadblock and gives the project the green light to proceed. So what's the timeline look like? Well, this isn't happening overnight. It's a long game. The plan is to have an initial port and a basic airport up and running by 2028. But the ultimate vision, a full-scale maritime hub with a 16 million TEU port, that's just a standard way to measure cargo containers, and a fully fledged city, that's not targeted until somewhere between 2040 and 2050. And really, it all boils down to this one massive question. This project puts India's strategic ambition and its economic future on a collision course with protecting one of the planet's most unique places and its people. The government says it can balance both, but the question everyone is asking is, can a development of this sheer size truly coexist with one of the most fragile and precious ecosystems on Earth? The whole world will be watching to see how this plays out.